So, thank you so much for tuning into Culture Fix. I am delighted to be joined by Australian country star James Johnston, who has recently dropped his second studio album, Where You'll Find Me. James has had several country smashes, including Raised Like That, um, and Country Is For Me. James is in the UK now and is heading back in August for Country Calling. So, thank you so much for joining me, James. Really excited to chat.
No, I appreciate you having me on, Andrew.
Well, this is exciting because obviously we in the UK we don't have a massive kind of country scene, but it is growing. How does it feel to be coming over for Country Calling in August?
I'm very excited. It's been one of those things for me. Every time that I post online, I say, where in the world should I go? And I always kind of get a lot of love from over here in the UK. And I did that maybe 6 months ago, and I got an email, the next day from Country Calling saying, "Hey, we actually got this festival. Do you want to come and be a part of it?" And I said, "Absolutely, I'd love to be there." So it's my first time playing in the UK, and I'm very excited about it.
And have you visited here before, or is this the first time entirely?
About 10 years ago, I stopped here for about 3 days on a layover flight and saw a little bit of London, but it was a very different experience back then. I was like a backpacker traveler, so I probably saw more of the pub than I did anything else.
That's still good though. That's still good.
It is.
Um, let's think back to your kind of your early influences in your early life. Do you remember the exact moment that you fell in love with country music?
A very, very young age. So I was 4 years old, and the first song we had this like talent contest at my daycare center, and other kids got up and did their dance routines or sang the Wiggle song. And with a big cowboy hat on, the boots, and the whole thing, I sang "Friends in Low Places" by Garth Brooks.
Guys.
And if you would have asked me at 4 years old what I want to be a country music singer. And if you ask me today what I want to be, it's still the same thing.
Well, the question is, did you win the talent show?
I don't even know. I honestly I can't even tell you if I did or not. But it was probably one of those participation awards that everyone
Yeah.
gets.
You mentioned obviously Garth Brooks there. Was there a country artist that you totally fell in love with early on, or that you're totally obsessed with? Was it him?
It was, yeah. Garth was a huge inspiration for me, and still carries through. Today, if I look at my live show and the way that I kind of perform and everything like that, there's a lot of Garth, that comes through in what I do, and I love the way that he would tell stories, but he was also a showman. The way that he would go and perform those songs was just incredible.
And was the kind of the radio culture, or is the radio culture in Australia quite supportive of country music? Is it quite a big genre over there?
It has become a big genre. It's changing. I think like anywhere in the world, very similar to here in the UK as well. Country was not the cool thing. It was kind of that dirty little secret that you would keep of sorts. But now, it's gone mainstream, and that's huge thanks to the Morgan Wallens of the world, the Luke Combs that are just have blown up country music. But yeah, today it's getting played. You do your shopping, and all of a sudden there's country music getting played. And what's been nice, sometimes I've been there buying some apples or something, and they're playing one of my songs, so that's always quite cool.
It's funny because I think back to my first ever gig was Kenny Rogers, and this was maybe like 15, 16 years ago. And when people ask your first gig, when you tell them, there is still that kind of like, oh, Kenny Rogers, like that sort of sneering. But I've noticed over time, the more you tell people that, the more they're like, oh, that's pretty cool. You saw him.
I
So the culture
know.
is changing.
Yeah. That is a very cool first gig, I would have to say. That is cool. I would have always said that's cool. Don't worry.
I know, obviously, earlier in your career, you dipped into American Idol, Australian Idol, and the X Factor. Do you think is that an experience that, looking back, that you still would have done, or is it something that maybe you would have gone a different route, or you kind of quite pleased you experienced those shows?
Yeah, I'm glad that I did them for different reasons that people probably would have expected. I certainly don't think that was not a big moment in building my career in terms of fan base and any of that sort of thing. It really wasn't. I went from having success on those shows to 6 months later playing in bars to nobody. The up and the down was very quick by being on one of those shows. But I learned a lot, and it kind of pushed me to go and just spend years on the road. I've played over thousands of shows, playing every little bar and pub across Australia, and I feel like that time was needed. And going on those shows and having not only having the success, but mainly the decline. That after 6 months and going, nobody's coming to my shows, nobody cares. That grit, that decision in that moment, do I go and do something else? Do I go get a trade or do something else, or do I do music? And when you're making no money, when nobody's coming to your shows, when none of it's working, if you still want to keep doing it in that moment, it's a pretty strong answer to say, well, this is probably what I love and what I should keep doing. And it took me 10 years until something kicked, but when it kicks, it was incredible.
Yeah, and I guess it must be really nice and satisfying to think, okay, I've gone through that and you've had the lows and actually now you're kind of getting the success you deserve. So it's nice that it's kind of come full circle.
Yeah, and I also think it prepares you too for I've had a lot of success in Australia, and I've been very lucky that some of my music has crossed over the water. But at the same time, coming here and coming to the UK, it's like I'm starting my story again. I'll go and play to 30,000 people and be a big festival in Australia, and I'll come here and on the tour we're going to add some rooms, and they're going to be like 300 pack rooms, and for me that's weirdly incredibly exciting. The idea that it's like we're back in the Wild West again. Let's build it from the ground up, and let's find those fans that are there from the start. The fan that can say, "I was at James's first concert in the UK, and he was playing to 20 people." And I think I'm excited about this, and I'm excited to take my music around the world. And Australia's been very good and very kind to me, and I'm very blessed for everything that's happened there. But I'm excited to kind of keep building the story.
Well, for anyone in the UK who's going to be coming to see you in August, what can they expect from a James Johnston show?
Big energy. That's all I'll say. If you're, it's not the sort of show that you just come and you sit down at. It's not a sit and listen show at all. I'll tell you that right now. I'll have you on your feet real quick. But it is. It's big energy. It's. I always say at the start of my show, tonight is not just about me. It is about every single person that is here with me tonight. And to make tonight truly special, we have to do this together. And it is. I'll have you singing, you're dancing, there's a good chance I'll drag you out of the crowd if you know the lyrics of my song, and I'll get you up on stage singing with me. It's that sort of thing. So I love the idea that we're all in it together, and I want to make that energy in the room electric, and you forget about any of your worries. I think different artists occupy different spaces. My music celebrates, I say celebrates country life, country values, but it also is a place to escape. When life's always not beautiful and pretty and perfect. And I feel like when you put my music on, and when you go and you put in the car or you come to a concert, it's the sort of music that you can escape to maybe a happier place. Maybe where your childhood was, or thinking about just being out in the open road, whatever it is. But it's, I think there's a little bit of joy that I try and put in most of my music.
I think what really comes across, as you mentioned, is that kind of like it's almost that kind of family nostalgia comes through as well. Do you feel that, since you become a father, that that's changed the way you approach music, or are you kind of continuing to write and sort of create music the same way than prior to when you had your children?
It's definitely changed. When I first started writing my first album, it was a lot of just reflecting on where I've come from. But now, I'm realizing that those stories about the way that I grew up and the way that I was raised is now the way that I'm raising my kids. So some of my new music is a little bit more present. It's a little bit more the life that I'm living right now and celebrating that. And it kind of celebrates the beauty in the imperfect, right? It's that you don't need to have lots of money and a big house and a flash car to find happiness and joy. If you've got the people around you that you love, which for me is my beautiful wife and my two boys, then I've kind of got everything. And there is definitely a through line that comes through my music recently of that, and I can't force that. I feel like when I sit down and when I just put pen to paper, my stories will just be what they are, and if that's what I'm feeling in the moment, that's what will come.
Do you notice a difference when you are working with like Australian collaborators to maybe when you're working in the US with American collaborators, or is the kind of the vibe similar across, both countries?
I would say it's very similar, and I've been lucky to work with some of the best songwriters in Nashville and best songwriters in Australia. And one of the things that's great about music is that You can walk into the room with the best songwriter in Nashville and not get the best song. And you can also walk into a room with a guy that's just starting and write your best song. It's one of those crazy things about music. You can't, don't get me wrong, the hit rate on the guy in Nashville that's written 10 number ones is probably a little bit higher than the guy that's never written a song, right? But at the same time, there's a beauty in music that it's that you never know where that song's going to come from or how it's going to be shaped. And sometimes there's just a little bit of magic in the room that day that you capture something great.
How do you cope with that? Because as someone that's not a songwriter, I always think it must be quite tough to go into these spaces with maybe people that you know relatively well, or maybe people that you don't know so well, and just kind of open up and actually share those experiences that form the songs.
So I'll tell you, the first hour, and this is almost without fail of a songwrite, is therapy, and it's not. It's just the chat, it's the hang, and it's crucial. It really is, and this will be from the guys that are the biggest songwriters in the world to the new guys. That first hour of just hanging and chatting and not trying to write a song is actually some of the most important parts because you start to go, okay, well, what do we align on? What do we disagree with? What are we feeling? What's the emotion? What are you going through as the producer in the room? Like, maybe you've just met the love of your life, or maybe you just went through a divorce, and or maybe, and I'm going like, I can feel what you're feeling, or it's so fascinating. Often in a room, there is different personalities too, and you have to take a different role. So some days you are the energy, right? Some days you are just bringing all the vibes, and there is somebody there that's the producer that is just trying to capture the magic, and there is somebody there that might only change 5 lines, but the 5 lines they change are just the magic. They're just sitting back, just watching. The flow might be between me and the producer, and that person, if they try and put their head in too much, they can actually mess up whatever's happening here. Other days, it might be me as the artist. I got this idea for a song, and then they just start bouncing off each other. And some days, my whole job is just to sit on my phone and write down the words because I know if I get in the way of whatever's happening over here, I'm going to mess the whole thing up. So you really have to learn to, have a little bit of realization in the room that some days it's not about you, some days it's all about you.
It's really interesting to kind of put yourself in that position, and actually, so often we listen to a song and you kind of you have a gut emotional reaction as a listener, but to actually think of the sessions behind that track, it is quite interesting to think of the dynamics in the room when that's being produced.
Yeah, and it's some days 90% of the song will just write itself and be super easy, and and you'll sit for 2 hours just trying to write the second half of the second verse, and you're like, we just can't figure this out. It's like I would describe songwriting as trying to solve the puzzle on a blank puzzle. You give those puzzles that are just a white puzzle, and you have no idea what's supposed to go together, but you have to try and somehow figure it out. That's kind of what it's like.
And are you a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to like finding that perfect lyric, or changing these minute details in a track?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've become obsessed, over this stuff, and it will live rent free in my head for months. Sometimes I'm just like, it's this. It's just not feeling quite right. Yeah, and it's terrible. Some days I just want to let it go, but it's absolutely something that becomes an obsession.
Well, let's have a wee chat about Where You'll Find Me, because that obviously came out in October last year. So it's had a few months to kind of be out there. And how has the response been from the fans to the album?
It's been incredible. I've got a huge my fan base, especially back home in Australia, has been so supportive, and we found out only about a couple of weeks ago that we released it in October, and the over the course of a year is 12 months, but in those 3 months it became the highest selling album of the year. So we managed to do that only in 3 months, which was phenomenal. And like at the end of the day, that's just thanks to people that are supporting me, my fans, and people that are in my corner. And so it's been incredible. And something that I love is seeing people discover songs that are not necessarily the hits. Some of the songs are the less streamed songs or whatever you call it. But they're just like, that's my favorite song. I love that. I love that an album can do that.
Yeah, I still love the concept of an album, and occasionally you speak to artists who are like, prefer putting singles out and kind of going by song basis. But I think with an album, It must be quite interesting as an artist to kind of put it out there and find that maybe tracks that you hadn't earmarked as singles are like, oh, that's getting a lot of streams, and I suppose now you can pull quite a lot of data and actually see this song is resonating with people. Does that kind of change the approach when you kind of you look at the numbers?
Yeah, it does. I think one of the best case examples of this is not me, but is a song called "Dirt Cheap" by Cody Johnston. It was just deep cut song, and it became a massive hit for him because people just discovered it, and he ended up turning it into a single. So yeah, absolutely, that can happen. And even now, I was just chatting to my manager before, and he said the third highest streamed song here in the UK is a song called "Keeping It Country," which is not a single. It was on my first album, but for some reason that's found a home over here a little bit. And that's cool. It's funny how music can do that.
Yeah. Um, I'd love to think about your first time in Nashville, because obviously that is just such a kind of dream for country fans, country artists to go there and experience that. What was your first trip to Nashville like, and what was the kind of the emotion you were feeling?
So it was about 15 years ago, and during that time I was not. I've talked about when I was a kid, I wanted to be a country artist, and I was going through that time when I was early 20s, where I was just kind of discovering myself, and I was trying different genres of music. I was just playing the pubs, but I was also backpacking a lot of the time as well. So I'd kind of like go and work for 3 months, try and save up live in a van, save up enough money to like be able to pay for an airfare, and then go and travel until the money ran out. That was pretty much my life, and I was traveling through Nashville. And I just got there and I went to the bars and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, what is this place? And it just sparked something in me. It was just this incredible thing. It was so, I just still remember it. It like gives me goosebumps because it was such a strong feeling. And that night I was staying in a hostel and they had a piano downstairs. And I got back from the bar after, I was pretty liquored up at that point, but probably about 2 o'clock in the morning. But I just did not want to sleep. I just wanted to capture this energy. And I sat behind this piano and I hadn't written a song for a couple of years during that time. And I sat behind the piano and I just started writing this song. And I wrote this song called Welcome to Nashville. And it pretty much predicted my life for the next 10 years. It's kind of crazy, but it was this song of like struggling as a musician, trying to figure out, trying to write the song and everything like that, which was crazy because it kind of set up the pathway of what my life ended up somewhat looking like for the next 10 years.
You
And
were
I stayed
manifesting.
up. I was absolutely manifesting, and I stayed up till like 7 o'clock that morning, just sitting behind that piano. I just did not want to sleep, and I think I went to bed for 2 hours and then woke up again. I just wanted to be a part of it. It absolutely woke something up inside of me, and so many of my life decisions from that point on were geared towards like country music and making it.
You mentioned the kind of the highs and lows of working up through like the bar scene. Do you have any like standout memories, maybe good or bad ones from, building your way up to the top through these bars?
Yeah, there is one moment when I was playing in outback Australia. We were just outside of Uluru. We were playing at a caravan park. That their claim to fame was they took camel rides at this caravan park. So we were staying there, and it was me and two other buddies of mine, a fellow called Matt and Josh, and we set up our gear and we were doing our own merch, our own PA. We were doing the whole thing. We had this van. We had two bunk beds in the van. We were coming through town, and we'd set it all up. Anyway, we set up, and this nobody showed up except there was this one man that was there, and he sat this old Aboriginal fella, and he was off the land, and he just come in and sit there, and he was sitting there with his arms crossed, and he's had his dog sitting there. We played the first song, and he just shook his head, and he walked out, and was left with the dog. The dog just sat there, just watching us as we're playing our music, and we just had to laugh. And at that moment, and it was funny because up to that point, we had other shows that were just doing the same. We had some days we had 50 people, but a bunch of those shows on that run that were touring, nobody would show up, and it was me and the bar staff, and me and the boys and the bar staff, and it was pretty disheartening. We put a lot of heart and soul into trying to make that tour work, and so I think we'd already been through the emotional roller coaster at that point of, okay, we're not superstars. This is what it is. And that show, we just kind of looked at each other and just laughed and was like, well, it's got to be uphill from here. It has to get better. Like it is the man and his dog, and the man leaves and it's just the dog. And it was uphill from there. But at the same time, I feel like those are the moments that make you and teach you the little bit of the grit to keep going.
Well, at least the dog stayed. Would have been worse if the dog walked out as well.
That's it. We had one fan there.
It's been really interesting to look at the reach of your music, and I know obviously South Africa has been a bit of a hotspot, and that you've kind of developed a lot of fans. Is it strange to see music hitting and like music kind of being a success in places that you maybe hadn't thought or hadn't anticipated?
Yeah, yeah. It's South Africa was a crazy experience for me. I saw what an artist called Kip Moore went over there and did some amazing shows, and it was that was the spark. And I was like, I want to go to South Africa. And going over there and doing it, and just seeing the reaction that we got from the fans, I ended up releasing a song over there, "Countries for Me," and it did some incredible things. And I ended up finishing that week. I was there for 10 days. And the last day I was playing in a stadium, and that's the reason I got booked to go there was that I was on a festival lineup. But we were in this stadium, and we started singing this song that we'd play together, and it was really kind of smashed it on social media and kind of became a bit of an anthem for the country at that moment. And where I was in South Africa singing this song with the crowd, and they were singing it back to me. And it was that moment on stage being like, what am I doing? I'm this like Australian country boy from a small town in South Africa in a stadium, and everyone's singing this song back to me. And that was one of those moments like, wow, this is really happening. But this is pretty cool. This is the adventure that I always dreamt of, you know?
Well, you have had a lot of big career milestones. We're thinking two golden guitars, six number ones, 26-week run at the top of the area charts. Has there been a moment that you've just genuinely struggled to take in? I know obviously you mentioned the South Africa gig. Are there any other moments that you've thought, wow, this is happening to me?
Absolutely. I think what comes with the territory of being somebody that's fairly, I would say, a fairly driven, fairly ambitious sort of person, is that you often don't take enough time to sit back and reflect and enjoy the moment. It is the bittersweet thing. What has kind of given me my success, which means that I'm always driving, always striving for the next bigger and better thing, is also can be a curse because you never really take moments to appreciate the moments. And it's something I'm definitely working on a lot more. But absolutely, there's been moments where I just sit back and be like, I'm thinking about the thing and what's making the show and how can I do better and all the rest of it. What's the next hit? And then that incredible moment's happening right in front of me. And you know, I think that's just something that you're just always constantly working on.
Sit back and just celebrate.
Exactly.
Um, I would love to finish with just some rapid fire, quick fire questions. First thing that pops in
Yep.
your head, nothing too tricky. I always say this, and then the first one people are like, "What?"
Okay. All right.
Um,
Let's do it.
what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, it is on a dark desert highway. What's that? Cali cool wind in my head. Want to spell a Calitas? What's it? Hotel California. Hotel
So the
California.
Eagles.
And the reason why it is that is because I murder that song. I cannot sing that song. It is in the worst key for me, and it's so terrible because I don't ever want to be that person that goes to karaoke that can actually sing because everybody hates that person. You want to go to karaoke and suck just a little bit, you know? And that's my song that I am terrible at singing, so it's always my go-to karaoke song.
Nice. Well, we got a wee preview there as well, which is, bonus. Um, if you could only listen to one album for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I would say, God, I don't actually know if it's the name of this album or not. I loved the Buy Dirt album. It may not be called Buy Dirt album, but the Buy Dirt album from Jordan Davis. Like that was just such a big influential album for me and my songwriting, during the 2000s, the 2020s when that came out. I would also say um, Drive, Alan Jackson. As I said, I'm terrible at knowing the album names because whatever album that was on, like the song Drive by Alan Jackson, was a huge influential album for me. I loved that album. And I would also say, the Friends in Low Places. Once again, I don't know if it's the name of the album, but the record with Friends in Low Places on it with Garth Brooks because that defined my childhood. That album.
Um, do you believe in guilty pleasures? And if you do, what is your guilty pleasure song?
Ooh, okay. Well, this is a really left to center one. but I have this secret affinity for like big band, like Michael Bublé, like Christmas Michael Bublé. Only one time a year, but I love like when it comes to Christmas time. There's not a whole lot of country. It is like Michael Bublé Christmas. I love it. I don't know why, but it is the one time a year I love a bit of booze in my life.
Nice. What is your favorite thing about Australia?
My favorite thing about Australia, I would say, is there's a few, but I've been thinking about this word recently. Yeah, nah, and nah, yeah. The way that we can make any word, or the word right, or mate is a great word. You know, the way that we can make a word have 1,000 different meanings depends on the way that you pronunciate it. You know, for instance, mate, you can say mate to your best friend, but you can also say mate to your worst enemy, and it's all about how you say it. Is that it has a different tone. I love our use of language.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Because again, it's a bit like a kind of English in the UK. It has so many different meanings depending on the kind of inference and how you say it. But yeah, um, very very cool. What is your favorite way to unwind?
I love building things. I'm not a sit back and do nothing. I love probably the most when I feel like at peace and is when I've got my hands busy and doing something very very physical. Yeah, just building something, just creating something from nothing, just going and finding a bunch of scrap timber in the shed and be like, I'm going to build a table today, or I'm going to build something. I think why is that I'm always thinking. And when you've got a cut off saw and you're cutting a bit of timber and you're sanding, it's like you're very present in doing that. So I love that. I also love riding motorbikes that for the same reason that when you're riding a bike on a trail or something like that, you are fully engaged in that process. So it kind of clears my mind a lot.
Nice. What is your biggest fear?
My biggest fear. Well, I'd say my biggest drive, which is also my biggest fear, is that when life is all said and done, I just want to have a good story to tell. And my biggest fear is living a life with it's not a great story to tell. You know?
The nice thing is, I suppose you will have albums worth of stories as well by that point that we
Mhm.
can dip into and kind of hear, which will be nice. Well, thank you so much, James, for chatting. It's been really, really interesting to kind of get to know your story and hear about the music and hear about all your exciting plans for the UK. And hopefully, we'll catch you in August at Country Calling.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look forward to seeing you there, Andrew. And thanks for the chat.
Amazing. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch up soon.
Sounds good. All right.
Cheers. Bye
See you,
bye.
buddy.